Montana Territory, September 1882, the first time Mason Pryor saw her. She was asleep behind the burnt-out schoolhouse with nothing but a threadbare shawl wrapped around her shoulders and a child curled into her side. He had been riding fence in the early morning light, the frost still clinging to the grass, when his horse spooked near the outer edge of the old school grounds. That was when he spotted the girl. No, not a girl. A woman. Young but not a child. Her face was gaunt, her hands wrapped tight around the smaller figure beside her. The little boy had straw-colored hair and a raw scrape across his cheek, maybe 4 or 5 years old. Mason dismounted quietly, boots crunching soft over the brittle grass. He did not speak right away. He just stood there, watching the rise and fall of her shoulders, the way she kept the child pulled tight against her even in sleep. She looked like she had not known comfort in a long time. Dirt streaked her skirt, and her boots were split at the seams. The boy stirred first, eyes blinking open. He sat up fast, like he had learned to wake scared. Mason crouched down a few feet away, hands open. "Easy, son. I am not here to hurt you." The boy stared, uncertain. Then the woman opened her eyes. She sat up fast, placing her body between Mason and the boy. Her bony shoulders squared like she was ready for a fight. "You lost?" Mason asked, voice low, steady. She did not answer. Her eyes flicked to the saddlebag on his horse, then back to his face. Her jaw tightened. "I am not looking for trouble," he said. "Name's Mason Pryor. I own the land this schoolhouse sits on." She said nothing, but her eyes softened just a bit when the boy tugged at her sleeve. "Bria," the boy whispered. Mason caught it. "Bria." Her name was Bria. "You got a name?" Mason asked, gentler now. She hesitated, then nodded once. "Bria Porter." "That your boy?" Her voice cracked. "My brother. His name is Perry." Mason frowned. "Where are your folks?" Her eyes dropped. "Gone." "How long you two been out here?" Bria looked away, arms pulling Perry tighter. "Couple weeks. Maybe more." Mason stood slowly and walked to his horse. He pulled out a wrapped bundle of cornbread and dried meat. He tossed it toward her feet. She stared at it like it might explode. "You eat that," he said. "Then we will talk." Bria did not move, but Perry, eyes wide, reached out and took the bundle. She did not stop him. He tore into the bread with both hands, and her shoulders dropped. Mason waited. When it was clear she would not run, he sat down a few feet away, hands resting on his knees. "You from around here?" Bria looked up, crumbs clinging to her lip. "No. Started in Kansas. Been walking west since spring." "Alone?" She hesitated. "I took Perry after our parents died. My uncle was supposed to take us in. When we got there, he had already left. No one knew where to." "You have any schooling?" "A little. I can read and write." She looked up, her eyes steady now. "I do not need charity." Mason tilted his head. "That's so? I just need somewhere safe for Perry. Somewhere he can sleep inside. And I will work. Scrub floors, cook, anything." Mason stood, brushing off his trousers. "Come on." She stiffened. "What?" He nodded toward the schoolhouse. "You cannot live behind this ruin. Come with me." Bria reached for Perry, pulling him close. "I do not know you. And I do not know you. But I am offering a warm place and a clean bed. That boy deserves that much." She looked at Perry, then back at Mason. Suspicion warred with exhaustion in her face. He waited. Finally, she nodded. She stood slowly, legs stiff. Perry took her hand, and they followed Mason to his horse. He helped them into the wagon he had used to haul fencing tools, laying out a blanket on the floorboards. They rode in silence for half an hour, back to Mason's ranch house sitting low against the hills, a 2-story structure with a wide porch and a crooked barn nearby. Smoke curled from the chimney. He helped her down, then lifted Perry. Bria's eyes darted around, not trusting anything fully yet. "You will live here," Mason said, motioning to the house. "And you will learn here." She blinked. "What?" He met her eyes. "You will learn here and live here. You are barely standing. That boy needs more than just scraps. You both do." "I said I do not need." "I am not offering charity," Mason said firmly. "I am offering a place. You want to work for it, fine. Cook, clean, whatever you want. But you will not sleep in the dirt again." Bria stepped back, her spine straight. "Why are you doing this?" Mason looked at her for a long moment. "Because I have seen what happens to women like you out here, and I would not stomach finding you dead behind a burned-out schoolhouse next week." Bria swallowed hard. Inside, the house was simple wide kitchen, worn chairs, a cast-iron stove. Mason led them up the stairs to a spare room with a narrow bed and a small window that looked out over the fields. Bria sat down slowly. Perry climbed up beside her and curled into the blankets like it was the softest thing he had ever touched. Mason stood at the doorway. "You get some rest. We will talk more later." Bria nodded once. But as he turned to leave, she said quietly, "Thank you." He paused, then gave a short nod. "You are welcome, Bria." Downstairs, Mason poured himself a cup of coffee with shaking hands. He had not planned on taking anyone in. He had been alone for 3 years now, ever since his brother died and left the ranch to him. He had kept to himself, worked the land, avoided town when he could. But something in that woman's eyes, sharp and tired and still holding on, had caught something in him. A thread he had not felt tugged in a long time. He looked out the window to where the sun was rising behind the hills. She had been sleeping behind the schoolhouse. Now she was here, and he was not sure what that meant yet. But something had changed. The sun had climbed halfway up the sky before Bria stepped into the kitchen. Perry still asleep upstairs. Her hair was damp, combed back from her face. She wore the same dress, though she had scrubbed the worst of the trail dust from it. Her eyes moved carefully over the room, the kettle hissing faintly on the stove, the stack of tin plates by the basin, the rag rug faded beneath her bare feet. Mason didn't look up from where he was slicing potatoes near the window. "There's coffee if you want it." Bria hesitated, then moved to the pot. She poured herself half a cup, fingers curling tight around the handle. She didn't sit. "You sleep well enough." Mason nodded once, then went back to his work. The only sound for a while was the knife tapping steady against the wood. "I can cook," she said finally. "If you want. I do my own cooking." Her mouth tightened. "You said I'd work." "You will. But not today." She bristled. "I don't need coddling." "I didn't say you did." He finished slicing and dropped the pieces into a pan with a bit of grease. The scent of frying potatoes filled the room. Bria didn't move. "You ever handle livestock?" he asked without looking up. "No." "Ever use a washboard?" "Yes." "Good. You'll start with laundry tomorrow. There's a line out past the shed." She nodded, jaw set. "You'll also help me mend fence later this week. The wires sagging near the south acreage." She blinked. "You want me to help with fence? You said you'd do anything." "I did." He turned then, met her gaze. "I meant it when I said you'd learn here. I'm not feeding someone who won't shape up to the land." Bria held his look, something steadier in her now. "I don't expect to be kept." "I know." He lifted the pan off the stove and scooped the food onto 2 plates. "Eat," he said, handing her one. She took it, the heat seeping through the tin. She sat finally, across from him at the table. They ate in silence, the occasional creak of the house settling around them. "You live out here alone?" she asked after the first few bites. "I do." "No brothers?" "Sisters. Had a brother. He's gone now." She didn't press. You? He asked. No one left but Perry. She finished her plate and pushed it aside gently. What happened to your brother? Mason wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Rail accident. He thought he could jump a moving car. He was wrong. Bria looked down. I'm sorry. He rose, taking both plates to the basin. Don't be. That was his way from the start, fast and sure and never one for caution. The screen door creaked faintly as the wind picked up outside. Bria stood and walked to the window, arms crossed. Where do you go for supplies? Town's 15 miles west. I ride in once a month. You don't go more often? Don't like crowds. She turned. I could go. No, why not? Too far. Too many folks who ask questions. She studied him, quiet for a moment. You're protecting us. I'm protecting what's mine. A long breath passed between them. Bria stepped back from the window. Perry needs boots. His are breaking apart. I'll see what I have stored. Might be a pair left from when my brother was young. She nodded once. Thank you. Mason crossed to the cupboard and drew out a folded piece of cloth. You sew? Yes. He handed her a shirt with a torn shoulder. Good. You can start with this. She took it without hesitation, fingers brushing the frayed edge. I'll need thread. There's a basket in the parlor. Top of the trunk. She left without another word, moving with a quiet purpose. Mason stood at the window now, watching as the wind stirred the tall grasses near the fence line. The house felt different, less hollow somehow. Her voice still lingered in the air. Not soft but not cold either. Just careful. He didn't expect gratitude. He didn't want it. But as he listened to her footsteps on the stairs, he felt something settle in his chest. Not warmth exactly, more like the slow easing of something that had been knotted too long. Upstairs, Perry's small laugh echoed briefly. A sound light as dust kicking off sun-warmed boots. Mason let it hang there, untouched. There was work to be done. Always was. But something here had started to take root. Mason found her near the creek that cut through the northern pasture. Bent low over a washboard, sleeves rolled and skirt hem pinned to her knees. The wind carried the faint scent of lye soap and damp cotton. Her hands moved briskly, efficient, not hurried, wringing a shirt that had once belonged to his brother. The water beside her ran smooth and cold, sun catching in the eddies. He stepped around a patch of thistle and crouched beside the pile of wet clothes she'd already scrubbed. You missed breakfast. I was up early, she said, not looking away from the wash. Didn't want to wake Perry. He's still asleep? No. He's under the cottonwood with a stick and a biscuit. Said he's building a fort for ants. Mason glanced toward the tree line and spotted the boy crouched low beside a fallen limb, utterly absorbed. Bria dunked the shirt again and reached for the soap. If you've come to tell me I'm doing it wrong, don't bother. I haven't. Good. She worked silently a moment longer, then straightened and shook out the shirt. The fabric snapped once before she draped it over the line she'd strung between two saplings. Mason picked up a damp towel. You always this quiet when you're working? I don't see the sense in talking when there's nothing useful to say. He nodded, folding the towel and laying it flat over a nearby rock. The silence stretched again, but it didn't press the way it had when she first arrived. Settled. You ever been through the Bitterroots? She asked suddenly. No. I've ridden the base of them, but I never crossed. My father used to talk about them. Said the trees got so thick you could walk all day and never see the sun. What kind of work did he do? Teamster. Hauled freight from Dodge to Fort Lyon in the winter. Rode with him once when I was about 12. He made me ride on the wagon bed. Said the cab was for grown men and hardbacks. She paused. He died in a cattle stampede the next spring. Our mother followed soon after. Mason picked up another shirt and began wringing it. And your uncle? Bria's jaw worked. He was a drunk who wanted the land and nothing else. We left before he could figure out how to sign it over. Neither spoke for a while. The wind moved through the grass like breath, long and low. You didn't have to take us in, she said finally. Most wouldn't. I didn't do it for most people. She turned to face him fully, eyes shaded with something unreadable. Then why? You looked like someone who'd kept going longer than they should have had to. Bria blinked once, like she hadn't expected an answer that plain. She glanced away, then back again. I'll earn it, Mason. All of it. I know. Perry came running then, hair mussed, cheeks pink from sun. He skidded to a stop beside her and held out a handful of twigs. I made a cannon. Bria crouched to inspect it. That's a fine one. Will it protect the ants? Only the nice ones. She smiled, the first he'd seen from her small, but real. It curled at the edge of her mouth like it had been waiting. Perry leaned against her hip, already distracted by the glint of water. Mason stood. I'll take him in. We need to bring in the eggs before the heat settles. Bria's eyes flicked toward her brother. He listens better when he's got a job. Mason reached out a hand. Come on, soldier. Chickens need guarding. Perry took it without hesitation, his small fingers curling into Mason's palm. As they walked back toward the house, Bria returned to the washboard, but her posture had changed. Less guarded, less braced. Mason glanced back once. She was wringing a pair of trousers now, her hair catching in the breeze. Inside the coop, Perry darted between nests like a rabbit, too quick for the hens to bother. Mason let him chatter, the boy's voice a constant hum under the wooden rafters. Afterward, Mason set the basket on the porch rail and leaned against the post. Bria was visible from here, still at the creek, still working. He didn't know what to call what was growing between them, but he knew the land it didn't give anything fast. It waited, watched, and when something rooted, it held tight. Whatever was taking shape here, it felt like that. Steady, unrushed, the kind of thing that might last. By the time the cottonwoods had begun to lose their green, the rhythm of the ranch had shifted. Bria no longer paused before crossing thresholds, and Perry had claimed a corner of the barn where he kept his pine cone collections and a blanket for the barn cat. Bria spent her mornings tending the hearth and her afternoons in the fields, or by the water trough mending tack or learning to set fence posts. Her hands were calloused now, and the sun had drawn faint freckles across her nose. Mason watched her from the hay loft one late afternoon, the light falling low and gold through the slats. She was feeding the chickens with a steady patience, not rushing, not speaking. Her presence had settled into the place like a stone in the foundation, unmoving, necessary. He climbed down and crossed to the well, drawing up a bucket. She didn't look up when he passed her the dipper. I've been thinking, she said after 2 long gulps. You ever consider turning the schoolhouse into something useful? He leaned against the post, arms folded. What kind of useful? Proper schooling. For Perry, maybe others. There's no teacher within walking distance. Mason tipped his hat back. You offering? If I had the slate and books, yes. I know enough to teach letters and numbers. Enough to shape a start. You think the neighbors would send their young ones here? If they're anything like I was, they'd come just to be inside a place with walls. She handed back the dipper. And if not, it's still something. Perry's sharp. He needs more than chores and dirt. Mason nodded slowly. I can ask around. See if anyone has old readers lying in storage. Chalk'll be harder. I can make do. She turned back toward the coop, but he stopped her with a question. Why'd you bring Perry with you when your uncle left? Bria didn't answer right away. A breeze stirred her skirt, kicked a few dry leaves across the packed earth. He was just little then, she said at last. Didn't understand what we'd lost. I figured if I could keep walking, he wouldn't have to. Mason studied her profile. He's lucky you're the one who did. She didn't thank him, just gave a faint nod and kept walking, her steps slow and even. That night, after Perry was asleep and the fire had burned low, Mason found her outside on the porch, her knees pulled up beneath her, a shawl wrapped tight. The stars were out, sharp and cold overhead. He didn't sit right away, just leaned on the rail, looking out over the dark slope of pasture. "There's a barn raising at the McKinnons next week," he said. "You could come. Might be a few women there with children. Could ask about books." Bria kept her eyes on the field. "You trust them?" "Don't need to. Just need to listen. I haven't been around folks in a long while. You don't have to talk. Just be there." She was quiet for a moment. "You'll be there too?" "I will." She pulled the shawl tighter, then looked over at him. "You ever think about marrying?" His hand stilled against the rail. "Once. Before my brother died. She was from Billings. Didn't want ranch life. She left when the spring floods came." "Did it hurt?" "Yes." Bria nodded like she understood something unspoken. "I never thought I would. Seemed foolish with the way things went. But lately..." He turned toward her. "Lately I think maybe it isn't foolish," she said. "Maybe it's just brave." They stayed like that a long while, the wind moving gentle around them. Mason didn't push, didn't turn away. Just stayed near, steady as the ridge behind them. When she rose to go in, she paused beside him. "I'll go with you to the McKinnons." "All right," he said. She stepped inside, quiet as breath. Mason remained, watching the stars shift overhead. The night didn't feel quite so wide anymore. The morning of the barn raising brought a sky so clear it seemed scrubbed clean. Bria stood in the bedroom Perry now shared with her, tying his suspenders with steady fingers while he whispered something about cows and wheels. Mason waited outside, reins in hand, his wagon already packed with a basket of bread she'd baked the night before. The road to the McKinnon place wound through golden fields, the last of the season's tall grass swaying in the breeze. Perry sat between them, head resting on Bria's arm, his eyes wide with the kind of quiet awe only children carry into new places. "You ever build a barn before?" she asked. "No," Mason said. "But I've fixed more roofs than I can count. It's all hammer and timber when it comes down to it." She brushed a curl from Perry's temple. "I've never seen so many people in one patch of land outside a funeral. They'll be strangers until they're not." He offered her a small cloth bundle then. Inside were a pair of hairpins carved from antler. She turned them over in her palm. "Where did you get these?" "Found them in the bottom of my brother's old trunk. Figured they'd been waiting for someone to wear them." She fastened them in her hair without a word, her eyes staying on him longer than they had the day before. When they reached the McKinnon homestead, the fields were already peppered with wagons. Men hauled beams into place, sleeves rolled, boots kicking up dust. Women worked near the cook fires, sleeves flour dusted, skirts brushing the dirt. Children dashed between fence posts, yelling names and chasing shadows. Bria moved among them slowly at first, Perry's hand tucked into hers. A red-haired woman with a wide smile waved her over and pressed a bowl of stew into her hand. Mason saw the moment Bria's shoulders eased, just slightly, as if the shape of welcome was something she still didn't quite know how to carry. He joined the men lifting framework, his hands finding rhythm beside calloused palms and laughter that rose easily. Bria helped near the fire, peeling potatoes and speaking soft with a woman who had a baby strapped to her back. Perry sat in the shade with two other boys, trying to teach them how to whistle with a blade of grass. By dusk, the barn stood upright, roof unfinished, but bones strong. Lanterns hung from the posts, and someone had started up a fiddle. Couples spun in slow circles on the packed earth, boots scuffing, skirts twirling. Bria stood just beyond the edge of the firelight, arms folded, watching. Mason crossed to her, dust still clinging to his shirt. "You dance?" he asked. "Not since I was 16. Want to remember how?" She hesitated, then nodded once and placed her hand in his. They moved slow, a quiet two-step that didn't need flourishes. He kept one hand at her waist, the other curled around her fingers. Her eyes stayed on his steady. "You planning to keep us long?" she asked. "As long as you'll let me. I could. I hope you do." She leaned in then, her forehead resting just below his jaw, and he felt her exhale like something inside her had finally let go. They drove home beneath a sky thick with stars. Perry slept across Bria's lap, his breath warm against her skirt. She didn't speak, just rested her hand over Mason's on the reins. That winter, the schoolhouse was rebuilt. Mason and Bria cleared the cinders by hand, beam by beam. He cut new planks. She scrubbed the soot from the remaining stone. By February, the roof was sealed, the windows patched, and a small iron stove sat in the corner. Bria taught Perry in the mornings, and in spring, 2 other children from nearby ranches joined them. Some days, Mason worked the south pasture and returned to find Bria reading aloud by firelight while Perry memorized letters carved into a plank. Other days, she met him in the field, hands stained with ink, cheeks pink from wind, and helped him haul seed. One evening, she found a ring on the kitchen table, simple, silver, set with a small opal. She turned to find Mason leaning in the doorway, arms crossed. "You sure?" she asked. "I've been sure since the morning you asked about the schoolhouse." She stepped to him, placed the ring in his palm, and said, "Then put it on me." They married that spring, beneath the same cottonwoods where Perry had once built forts for ants. The preacher came from town, and the neighbors brought pies and quilts. Bria wore a dress the color of pale cornmeal, her hair pinned with the antler combs. Perry stood beside her, grinning, holding the book she taught him to read from. That night, after the guests had gone and the lanterns had burned low, Mason sat on the porch with Bria beside him, her hand tucked into his. "You miss Kansas?" he asked. "No," she said. "I don't miss anything that came before this." He rested his chin lightly against her hair. "You think you'll stay?" "I already have." The wind moved through the grass, soft and slow. Inside, Perry slept soundly in the room that had once been spare. They stayed on that land for the rest of their lives, working side by side through droughts and harvests, building a quiet kind of love that didn't ask for more than what they gave each other freely. Bria taught letters in the schoolhouse until her hair turned silver. Mason worked the fences until his hands stiffened and Perry was grown. And every night, after the work was done, they sat together on the porch, shoulder to shoulder, their hearts steady in the place they'd built from kindness, survival, and all the quiet ways people choose to stay.